and I just didn't have access to the artists. So I decided to create my own, because I felt if I created my own artists and basically take out ads in papers, if I was able to cast my own artists, they were more likely to work with me and maybe like let me write their songs or co-write, you know?
But yeah, man, thanks so much for doing this. This is a podcast about you and your journey in music. And obviously we'll talk about the book, which is pretty much lays out kind of your life quite a bit. And I've got about a third of the way through it. It's such a fascinating story. I can't wait
Thanks, man.
to get through the
Thanks,
rest
man.
of your book, man. It's really, really cool.
Thanks. It's been,
Yeah, I'm such a nerd for like, documentaries and autobiographies.
I'm the same guy. I mean, honestly, that was at the core of writing this thing. I think it was just sort of, at the end of it, I want just following the paths of my favorite documentaries and tomes and memoirs and just stuff that's a little off the radar. I'm the guy whose favorite documentaries are always deeply buried in Amazon Prime, like at the bottom. Like I'll go down a rabbit hole that's insane just to find something that just sort of beats to its own drum. And I thought this book might have a similar trajectory.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love it. Just reading your kind of just about you, your bio and stuff, and then seeing that you were like babysat by Andy Warhol, just like the life trajectory of from what I've just, obviously you've written so many huge hit songs and worked with so many people, and then it's like these other cool little nuggets that you find out within the book are super fascinating.
The Warhol thing's funny because obviously it was, especially shopping a book, it's a fun little like headline grab,
Sure.
but it's really true. So it's, it wasn't a weekly occurrence. It only happened a few times, but it was just, it's a very strange way to shape your introduction to the arts,
Yeah, I was expecting going into that chapter, I was like, oh, maybe he just, when you say, babysat by Andy Warhol, maybe he just was obsessed with looking at his art or, something like that, where your mom would be working or doing something and you're just like obsessing over it. But it's literally you were like at his house.
It was pretty literal, man. I mean, he was in our lives for probably 8 or 9 years, and just, coming in and out. And it was a really interesting introduction to celebrity and fame and all the sort of all the strange trappings that come with it, and just dealing with different sorts of personalities, etc. It was incredible. It was like a master class at such a young age. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, I can't even imagine being in that situation. What I do think is really kind of cool, I mean, in the beginning of the book, you kind of talk about your father and how he was writing a book and never finished it. And is that kind of what gave you the kick to want to really put down your life stories?
What broke my heart about my folks, both of them, is that parts of their narrative were lost, to the pre-internet bubble, you know what I mean, historically. So there's very little content about my mom online, and her life was fascinating. And my dad was similar, and I just, I didn't want, I felt like it just, for my daughter and maybe any other future generations of my family, I thought a little historical context about sort of, just little stuff, where we came from, and, sort of, the work that we put into our art. And also just, just, I felt for my own career, when I looked at it through a lens, if I were to Google myself, it's so strange. There's so many different records, and there's so many different paths and turns and twists. And I felt it might be nice to sort of just shape my story a little bit and just, frame it a little bit, just so I think the driving force in my career was just a psychotic tenacity. And I wanted to sort of express that to my kid, and also to any creative out there. I mean, I wrote this thing, and originally it was really born out of a writing exercise. I do all these exercises just to stay fresh every day creatively as a lyricist, so I'm just always putting things on paper. And I think this book began that way, right when my dad passed. But what's funny about it is, as I delved deeper into it, I thought about all creatives out there of varying stages in the journey, right? People who are in the front end, kids who are just really dabbling in music or the arts, or people are looking for in the great resignation who've suddenly woke up at the age of 50 or 60 and said, you know what, all I really want to do is write a song. Like, the end of the day, I kind of wanted to speak to all of them because
Mhm.
I really felt that when I started out, my talent level was such an anemic level that I felt that if I'm able to actually have a career doing this by just getting better and constantly just learning a craft and really just sort of mastering a skill set, I thought, anybody can, and why not just sort of encourage people without it, feeling self-helpy or anything, but just the God's honest truth is you got to put the work in, put the
Mhm.
work in.
Yeah, and the amount of artists you've worked with, and just the spectrum of everyone from, you have Ringo Starr and Def Leppard to One Direction, and even Good Charlotte, and some of these Panic at the Disco, and it's so wide. It's such a wide range, and it's so cool that you're able to write kind of in all of those different genres and be
Well,
relatable and all
I
that.
think at the end of the day, one thing that worked for me as a writer from inception, one thing that really played to my hand was I grew up on these KTEL records, which is equivalent to growing up on the now. That's what they call music compilations, right?
Hmm.
You know, and when you grow up on these compilations that are so sort of genre schizophrenic,
Hmm.
right? So many multi-genres on one compilation, hip hop, rock, this, that, what happens is you just you study it all and you become a sieve. You take it all in. So I was never genre specific. And a lot of writers I know are. A lot of writers are either just pop kids or R&B kids or rock kids. But for me, I was 15 genres in one because that's how I was raised. That's what I listened to. So it's super indigenous to my wiring to bounce between genres, and it's probably what gets me up in the morning to do this, because once I'm doing one lane, I'm stuck in one lane for too long, I feel like my writing begins to suffer, you
Mm.
know but if I'm constantly shape-shifting and trying a new sort of genre, and the skill sets that work with that too, because obviously, the writing approaches are very different. um it really, I would say, it does keep me in it. You know what I mean? It keeps me invested because I can wake up and I feel completely re-energized to take on sort of the challenge. I mean, writing, I wrote and produced the OJ's Farewell record. I wrote 3 songs on it, I think, in 2 or 3 songs I produced the record. And one thing I would say is just trying to do a deep dive and try to write an OJ song on a
Mhm.
farewell album that is a testament to their brilliance, and and to bow at the altar of Gamble and Huff and the guys, and Tom Bell and the writers that Linda Creed, the writers that I wanted to be. It was incredible. But the deep dive that I did, it was months before I even picked up a pen to start writing it.
Mhm.
I really just wanted to get under the hood of the genre and just write, okay, I'm writing classic 70s soul. What does that really mean to me? What is my voice in it? What era of the OJs specifically would I want to, create the sequel from? Right.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to do a pastiche where it's the same record, but I do want to sort of play within the confines of one era and build off of it. And, it's a deep dive, man.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
it's, like, very research heavy in that sense of, like, knowing kind of where you wanted to begin and
you
what
know,
where
I,
you wanna pick out.
I just geek out on all this stuff, man. I'm just a fan. At the end of the day, I'm just a fan who somebody let into the building, which is awesome.
Yeah, I just was I related so much to your story early on as a kid, just being, like, obsessed with music, and you talk about the top count, the Casey Kasem, like, top countdown, and, like, writing the songs down, like, knowing where where the top songs land on the countdown, and all of that stuff. Like, I was similar, and then I would go but I became more genre focused. I'm not a songwriter, but I was just a music lover, and that's why I do
And
this.
what was what was the genre?
I got way into punk rock when I was a kid,
Yeah,
and then it kind of branched out to the pop punk
yeah,
stuff was happening when I was
yeah.
late high school, early college days, and seeing some of those the Panic
Well,
at the Disco bands were,
look, it
but a
was,
little earlier than that.
yeah, like the first wave, like, Saves the Day and
Right.
Thursday
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Dashboard and all
Taking
that
Back
stuff.
Sunday and
Taking Back
Dashboard.
Sunday. I mean, look, that was an incredible scene, man,
Hmm.
and it was funny because when I was offered an opportunity to even write within that realm, at the end of the day, what appealed to me about it was it was a scene where I felt like it was a return to the front man or front woman
Oh
being a
yeah.
star again.
Hmm.
And that excited me because I felt like there had been too many years where, indie rock or alt rock, any of that stuff, it sort of was devoid of like the charisma up front, like Julian Casablancas was awesome, but there were very few of those things where I could
Hmm.
actually name the front person, and suddenly you had these bands with Gerard Way and, I mean, and, Patrick and Pete or like Brendan or any of these guys where they were at the forefront of the stage. And then we stepped into it. It's funny because I was a punk rock kid too. It was one of the genres that I loved because a band, my band in high school, we covered, Husker Du. I think we dabbled with the Replacements. And so like for me, I just wanted to like Bob Mould was one of my favorite lyricists. Bob Mould like wrote, lyrics that completely shaped my high school experience. Like he nailed teen angst to the point where I was very angsty, you know.
Hmm.
So I just was able to sort of channel those emotions again when I worked with these bands. And it was probably one of the most, probably my favorite stretch. One of my favorite stretches ever doing this was like the pop punk, that first sort of era of like, we were a little bit later to the ship, but I would say like the 2005 to like 2009, it was great. It was getting a little more pop, which I also
Hmm.
liked because I have pop leanings. So it was a little, songs were getting a little more focused, you know, but it was awesome. It was because it was a scene full of stars, and I still believe in stars. I'm an MTV kid, and that was the
Yeah.
last MTV wave.
Sure. No, for sure. For sure. And yeah, I love the lyrics. That's what drew me into to those bands. Like there was something so personal to what they were writing. I was like, whoa, like this is just so different and like dark to a lot of the stuff that was happening
Oh,
prior to that.
you know what? It was because it felt like every arty high school kid's journal, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
and I love that because that's what mine read like. When I heard Westerberg and I heard Morrissey and I heard these things in high
Uh-huh.
school, Robert Smith, it just created all this angst. It was a way for me to filter all my angst. I would just furiously scribble down, poems about all these unrequited crushes and things like that. And that's what this, manifests into a career writing lyric. It's just, it
Hmm.
all starts there. So I get it. I see why you were completely drawn to it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I loved it. I was gonna say, so just based off your book, you're born and raised in New York. You kind
I'm
of
a New
moved
York kid. Yeah, I'm a New York
north.
kid. Yeah, I was born in New York and we moved to Westchester County when I was 3. This was I was born in the early 70s. So this is when New York was very scary. And
Hmm.
thankfully my parents, were able to get us out and we ended up in Westchester. And I lived here till I was 18, and then I went right to the city and basically never returned, and then did years in the city and then did a decade in LA. And it's been a fun little journey. And now I'm back where I grew up, which is obviously I feel like I'm tripping my face off. It's awesome. So
That's crazy. Like, are you? I mean, I don't know how small the town or whatever. Is there like the same high school and stuff? Like, will your kids go
my
through that
so
same
so I have one
era?
kid. My daughter is a junior at the high school that I went to,
That's
and
wild.
it's been amazing because she's been able to do her whole high school experience here. And we have such a small family, and she doesn't, my parents are gone, and
Hmm.
I have a brother, and that's it, and there really isn't a lot of family. So for her, what's great is this community is a family, because I know so many people, and I know people from different lives. I know people from growing up in this town. I know people who moved here out of the city when they had kids, and then I know people from the music industry here. So I have 3 lives here on any given day,
Hmm.
and it's absolutely magical. It's wonderful because they're all great people, and it's such a sweet town with really like great positive energy, and it's a nice group. So it's nice for my kid, I think.
Yeah, that's really cool to just kind of be back and yeah, where you grew up and familiarize yourself and just know what it looks like as far as
I'm also
schooling and everything else.
I'm also just chasing inspiration, and a decade in LA was marvelous. I love LA too, but
Hmm.
I just always like bouncing around because it just, once again, it's like bouncing around genres. It's like I just need stimuli, and this gives me so much inspiration on a daily basis. It's a different lyric, right? It's a
Hmm.
different song. So it really it fuels so many weird narratives. Just the characters and just the experiences just fuel and re-stimulate, maybe take me back to 18 again, which is great, you know.
Hmm. In your book, you reference that I think you're talking about a class or something where you get to decide, like you get to shadow, or you're going to do some sort of, uh, you shadow somebody at a certain work situation. Like if you wanted to be a doctor, maybe you could get a gig just following a doctor around or whatever, and you say you want to be a record producer. Like, I just thought that was so awesome. I remember taking a similar test, but it was like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I wrote like rock star, and I had like no musical experience or like never written a
Fake,
song, but I was like, these are the
fake it
people
till
I
you make
love.
it, man. Fake it
Right.
till you make it.
And I
Yeah.
love you put record producer, and then they put you what at like a
Car,
electronic shop that's like
car, car,
installing
car
car.
stereo installation, you know? Yeah, it's funny. Look, the 80s, by the way, just one thing in defense of this town, the one thing I would say is now they have all these incredible electronic music programs and studio programs, all this stuff.
Sure.
But the caveat, you know, in the 80s, man, it was the Wild West here. And what I would say is, you know, God bless the teacher who assigned me the job of learning how to install car stereos as a record producer. But I would say it was one of the most traumatic days of my life, where I really felt, you know, just in terms of, I felt like, wow, if the movie ends here at this time, this ends really bad. I'm not going to be able to face this vision. And it was funny because, you know, pre-internet, you got to understand, pre-internet, there was just no information, right? Like, as
Mm-hmm.
I've gone on in life, I've realized that, you know, I've gone down rabbit holes historically of this area. And, you know, the Isley brothers had a recording studio in this town. No one ever told
Really?
me that when I was growing up. You know, Phil Ramone, the Billy Joel's incredible producer, lived here. He was the only person I knew in music. And John Waite was, you know, was coming off of Missing You and was, you know,
Uh-huh.
killing the 80s. And he rented a house here for a minute, I think, or he owned a house or something. But, you know, I used to see him at the mall, and I reference it because he, you know, I'd see him at the record shop, and that was huge. But outside of that, you know, I've learned later on in life, all these characters. I'm really tight with Mark Rivera, who's Billy Joel's MD, he's the sax player and also
Mm-hmm.
sings all the backgrounds, and also MD'd Ringo's band. But on
Oh
top of
wow.
that, in the 70s and 80s, he was, you know, both the sax and also the background vocals on all those Foreigner records. He's a legend. And this guy lives 10 minutes away. And he told me, oh man, you know, the Foreigner guys lived here and Peter Frampton lived here at the height of Peter Frampton. No one ever told me that. There's no internet. I mean, like, it might have changed my outcome. Instead, they sent me to a car stereo installation place. So,
Right.
you know, history can rectify some of the ills of your youth, but that was definitely it's changed a lot here, man. I'll tell you this. Look, this is just a farm town. These are just it's just horse farms, and just it's pretty, you know, it's pretty quiet. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
quiet area. It's not, it's very unassuming and very pleasant. But people, I think, come here and hide because it's an hour out of the city. So you can, you know, see tons and tons of rural stuff, and at the same time be on the Upper West Side in 50 minutes. So that's what's
Mm-hmm.
really great about it.
But I mean, the fact that you knew you wanted to be a record producer, I mean, that's just,
Well, look,
I wouldn't have even known what that, you know, really was, in the sense, like, I knew you nerded out hard on music and
oh, dude,
the top songs and stuff.
I didn't know what it meant. It was
Oh,
just a term.
it was
Nile
just a
Rodgers,
term.
basically. Yeah, Nile Rodgers. My mom meets Nile Rodgers, and he's the loveliest guy in the world. And he says to my mom's trying to articulate um, my social struggles at that
Mm-hmm.
age. You know, I'm in eighth grade and I have a ton of friends, and I'm also sort of a goofball who can't, not really academic or anything, but I love music, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Niall just said, well, maybe he's a record producer or songwriter. And I just took that, and I just literally, it was almost like a hello, my name is sticker. And I put
Oh.
it on my chest that day, and I just decided to wear it for the next 100 years. And that's what I've done. But, you know, I didn't know what it meant at the time. I sort of, you know, I had a window. I mean, he explained, he was so kind and caring with my mom and my dad at this dinner, and he really sort of, you know, gave the blueprint of what a producer did. And it was akin to directing a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd seen the word record producer, and I was just coming to terms with the notion of what a film producer, a TV producer was, because, you know, I'd heard those terms, and I felt, so I always thought record producer was like the money guy. And
Yeah, that's what I
I am
always
not,
had.
and I'm not a businessman. I have no business acumen, and I'm certainly not the money guy. I'm a creative, but you know, another lifetime I would have been a screenwriter, which is a
Mm-hmm.
songwriter, or a record producer, which is a director, a film director, because that's what you're doing. As a record producer, you're directing the production. And
Mm-hmm.
so both of those things appealed to me. I just, at the end of the day, I'm more of a screenwriter than a director, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I love writing songs.
When it came to, like, you said you played in a band in high school, like, did you start playing music or like instruments early on too, or is it
No,
more of just like a fan?
well, I played guitar and I played guitar and I was terrible. I kept stopping and starting, and I still to this date I'm terrible. I use it to write, but I'm terrible. I have no idea what I'm doing. No, I was the lead singer, and committed vocal crimes at any house party or battle of the bands that would take us. But I held back guys who were really talented. I was the missing link in the equation. But once again, tons of heart. You
Uh-huh.
know, well, the conviction was there, maybe not the skill set. So it's
So
fine.
when it comes to working with the 21 hit songs and all and these bands and people that you've worked with along the way, are you mainly helping with the lyrics or just
Yeah,
the whole?
I write lyric and melody, and that's what I do. I used to produce a lot of records. So I produced a lot of stuff. So the stuff in the 2000s, 2000, from whatever 2002 to 2010 or 12, I produced on most of that stuff as well, which
Mhm.
was great because I was writing and producing. But I just, I took a step back from production because I realized there were just so many kids that, the technology was moving at such an incredible pace. And I really felt that it was I was never going to be able to keep up, and just wasn't as sort of aesthetically dialed in as some of the other producers. They were more musical, and I was coming from a songwriter who produces, so I understand sort of why songs work very well. But my productions, I felt like were not beginning to follow suit, and I tended to overproduce things because this was the steroid era of baseball. So I was doing like my tracks were on steroids too. I felt like they
Mhm.
were just full of creatine and all these other bad chemicals because they just 200 tracks of just noise. And I just, I was able to take a step back from it and thought, well, lyrically and melodically, that's how I always drove my work. And so just kept that focus. But what's helpful about me, I think, as a writer, is you can put me in a session with anybody, and I will write top line, but at the same time, I can at least give some production feedback from somebody who's climbed the mountain successfully previously without
Mhm.
asking for credit and without asking for money. But just for the sake of the song, I can be that extra voice in the room who's been there before.
Mhm.
And so it's like almost like I'm a song coach while I'm writing the lyric and melody as well. And that probably helps.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it does. With like I mean, how do you even get into something like that? I mean, when I think of a song, I know there's a ton of people that do what you do, and not obviously as well, but like there's songwriters, right? There's people that write songs but I feel like a lot of the people that I've spoke to started off as wanting to be an artist, and then it became were able to get some sort of publishing deal that either they became an artist or stayed in the songwriting world. Like, how did you break into this? And did you have like a batch of songs, or you gave a song to someone and it worked? Like, how do you even
I'll tell
start?
well, I used to wear brass knuckles and just like, just beat people down. You know, I tried everything in this business, and I think that's what I really delved into the book. So I had one singular focus. I wanted to be a traditionalist. It's we're taping this in the day Bacharach died, right? Which is very sad. But Bacharach died today. But I looked up to those kind of writers, the Brill Building people, Bacharach, all these people of era, and I wanted to craft like real traditional sort of songwriting. I really wanted to take it back to the essence. And I was such a fan of the Brill Building stuff, and I wanted to emulate, the notion of just any day, new artist comes in, and I have musicians hanging around ready to hit and demo it up the second we're done, etc. And I just didn't have access to the artists, so I decided to create my own because I felt if I created my own artists and basically take out ads and papers, if I was able to cast my own artists, they were more likely to work with me and maybe like let me write their songs or co-write. And that's what I did. And I did it unsuccessfully for many, many, many years. And we talk about that. And that's the point of the book is, the failure. It's not, we'll talk about it, but like, the book is born out of the notion of flopping my way to the top of the charts. It's the failures that led me to have a career in this. And I just wanted to, I had like Guinness Book of World Records level flops, man. I had nobody failed like me, but through each lesson, I rarely repeated these mistakes, and I never repeated the mistakes, to be honest with you. I just created new ones. But I learned, and eventually I found, it just took developing one act that worked, We developed a band called Boys Like Girls and wrote a song called Great
Oh, yeah.
Escape, and it was a hit. And at the same time, I had done the Gym Class Heroes record, and Cupid's Chokehold was a hit. And then we developed We the Kings and wrote a song called Check Yes Juliet, and it was a hit. And just there were a bunch of these songs in a row, and it was just a moment where the universe finally either caught up to me or I finally caught up to the universe, and it worked. But it was all the way I was able to to permeate artists who had a track record was I had to actually prove it by creating my own acts and having hits with them. And then I think the novelty in me began to, people were more amused by it.
Yeah, so you were almost having to create, or you were creating your own sort of band or artist, and being like, okay, this person's talented. I have a song, maybe they'll take it, and then if it becomes a hit, then
Yeah,
that's,
or they'll
a
write
check
with
on
me,
your side. Yeah,
they'll write
yeah,
with me,
yeah.
like we found a kid named Martin Johnson in Boston, in Andover, Massachusetts, and he had these friends and put together a band Boys Like Girls, and Martin was an incredible writer. He wrote Thunder himself, it's his song, but he came in and Great Escape, we wrote together, and that song changed it for me. It was never greed, and it was never born out of, oh, they're gonna have to cut my songs.
Right.
Boys Like Girls, I wrote, 3 or 4 songs on the first record and maybe 5 in the second, and the rest were Martin's, and he did just great without me. He's had a great career, but it was just finding talented kids who sort of believed in what I was doing from my end lyrically. And also Dave Katz, who I was working with at the time, was an incredible writer, and really a great melodic shaping sort of writer. And when you have artists who buy into it and really are willing to take a flyer with you can create great stuff. You need people who have faith. And, I
Mhm.
happened to find a bunch of kids at the right time who believed in the notion. So I was very lucky.
Yeah. So were you just reaching out to them? Like, how are you scouting? It's almost like you were
Oh, at
A&Ring and
a hundred,
songwriting
a hundred
and
percent, 100%. I mean, we were taking out ads in the Village Voice. We were all word of mouth. Friends would turn me on to artists, etc. And then, you know, um, I had a studio. I had a little shitty loft in the village, but like it was enough where people could come and we could track. Basically, I mean, we couldn't even track, to be honest with you. We'd have to, get work at nights at other rooms just to track basics. But then we could bring it back. But the writing, we had a great writing room. The space was we're sharing with Crush Management now, and we shared a loft with them back then. And so there's a studio in the back. It was magical because I could literally there was all the symbiotic energy between what we were doing and what they were doing, and just acts freely walking the halls, and you just constantly, hey, let's write a song, let's write a song, let's write a song, and it just the crazy thing about this business is you really do need one. You need one. And if you put yourself in a position to win with one song, if you're one song that raises its hand and I don't even it doesn't even have to hit the zeitgeist to some crazy extent, but it has to just be loud enough that other artists buy into your vision.
Mhm.
You can do great stuff, and that's what I was lucky enough to do.
So what would you say? Like, I mean, you talked about Boys Like Girls. Was that kind of the first one that did something where people like
Well,
were like, oh, like we need to get Sam to
well,
work with us?
Well, I did the whole Gym Class Heroes album, This Cruelest School Children, and that blew up. And it
Oh yeah,
happened
that was huge.
right. So I produced that entire record, and I wrote most of it with Travi and Dave Katz. And so I had that. And Boys Like Girls followed right behind it.
Okay.
And then I created Cobra Starship with Dave Katz and Gabe. And I wrote
Oh
Snakes on a
wow.
Plane. And so when Snakes on a Plane hit, I have a beginning, then the young bands are receptive. But I'll tell you something, it's still at that point in my career, I had the blessing of Carole King, who I'd written and produced previously. So I had a Carole King record. I had a bunch of these bands, but I really didn't have anything else. And it took Pat Monahan from Train to take a flyer on me and to give me an opportunity as a writer. And so then when we had hits with Train with Save Me San Francisco and Marry Me,
Yeah.
it opened up a whole other lane. And it's just it once it's just you have to just sort of just you look at it, you just have to look at the totality of your writing and just say, okay, if I can just this gets me to here, and then I'm going to just make a logical jump over this way, which isn't a huge jump, but you know what, it's more classicist, more traditional, less pop punky and angsty, maybe a little bit less, a little more um romantic lyrically in different ways, etc. And you just take that path. But then that opened up, and then Train begat Daughtry and Sugar Ray and Uncle Cracker and all these other things. And then eventually that leads to Fits, and it just you just constantly, to me, it was just constantly taking very baby steps in different genres. And but it was the sum of the, it all starts with the pop punk stuff, I think was that really was, the gateway, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. But it's
So
funny,
it
like
was
Train, but you know what's funny about Train is I was able to work with Train because I made a record with a singer named Charlotte Sometimes, she was a woman named Jessie Poland. She was a kid, and she went by Charlotte Sometimes, and it was an album on Geffen that nobody heard, but she had a video on a VH1 for a minute. But Pat liked the record. It was a cool record, and Pat liked it. So Pat gave her direct support on a solo tour. And then that was the opening for me to chase down Pat to, work with him.
wow. Well, when you started, you said in like kind of like that pop punk world, but as we said earlier, like those lyrics were so good, like the lyrics to those songs were so good, and I think that's why even now, this next wave of kids are falling back and like falling in love with those songs, right? I mean, you've got
Yeah,
these When We Were Young festivals that are going crazy, and Dashboard's touring all the time now, and like all these bands are like not that they went anywhere, but it's just like they're back on the forefront of everything. And I feel like,
it
sorry, go ahead.
expressed teen angst at the right time. You know what I mean? It was a
Mhm.
motive. Like from my end, we were writing a lot of codependent anthems, a lot of escapist anthems, like, stuff tricks I'd learned from Paul Williams as a writer, one of my favorite writers ever. Um, and I think these were themes that got lost, the decade that pop punk went away, from whatever 2011 to 2021 or so. I felt like there was a hole because you sort of had alt rock and, in various stages, and it's hard to even describe what alt rock is right now. So you had
It's
alt
all over the
rock,
place.
and then, hip hop took over the world, but, that's a certain thing. But there was just a certain spirit, that was missing. And that what was so great about emo and pop punk, it was so primal, but it was so lyrically driven.
Hmm.
And it's so great that, and look, by the way, it continues to regenerate, and I'm interested because what'll excite me more about this next wave is when it shifts. Like what I liked about this Juice World kid was what he was doing, where he was pulling trap beats and combining. So it was emo meets hip hop. I
Right.
like when genres combine to sort of become the next thing. When Dave Katz and I were writing, doing Boys Like Girls and We the Kings and working with Metro Station, all these bands, we were listening to tons of Swedish pop. I was an ABBA guy, he was a Max Martin guy.
Oh,
But
sure.
so we were both like really studying crafted melodies. So what we did was, I thought what we brought to the scene a little bit was a little more structure melodically, and, space, and lots of space, because it was really wordy and dense. And we
Hmm.
were able to sort of thin that out a little bit and create more of a crack, like just, keeping the same emotion. We didn't want to take away anything from any of these kids' emotions because they were feeling real stuff, just but basically creating melodic space and tension. And I hope that somebody else now pulls different genres together and we get emo jazz or emo trap or whatever the next thing is. I'm here for it. Emo drill rap, I don't know. I mean, I don't really care. I just want the art to continue. I would be bummed out if it's only a pastiche
Hmm.
of what I've heard previously. I like genres to continually push forward because that keeps music interesting for me. you
Hmm.
know like what I've
Yeah.
always loved about hip hop is hip hop historically was about constantly evolving 3 or 4 years as a genre.
Hmm.
And I feel like rock could do the same right now and needs to desperately.
Hmm. I completely agree. I think too, with being a lyricist and the way you write and being able to write in that, super emotional way with the Jim House Heroes, or, whoever pop punk band that you were working with at the time, I feel like that translates a lot into, because some of those pop songs, like Goo Goo Dolls you've worked with, or even
Sure,
Train, like stuff like
sure.
that, like the lyrics, that it's a different genre, but when you go back and look at some of the lyrics, it's like, wow, like this could be translated directly into something, an emo song from 2006.
It's all relatable. It's like, and those guys are, and by the way, and I work with incredible talents. I mean, Johnny Resnick is a great lyricist. Pat Monahan's an incredible lyricist.
Mhm.
Travis McCoy was a great lyricist, man. Like when we were working on his Cruel School Children, he wrote incredible stuff. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I've been blessed to work with really talented cats. So I'm very lyrical, but I also, I'm working with people who also are extremely expressive and are able to really convey that sort of that's it, sort of same sort of just that wit and that
Mhm.
that fire. And I think that that makes it even more inspirational when you're working with people who have incredible skill sets, you know.
Sure. When you said earlier about the book that you wrote it kind of on based off of the failures, like tell me a little bit about that.
You know, it's just I'm a sieve of content, man. You know, any documentary, any book, you know, I'm a voracious reader, and I'm always reading bios of just anybody who did it previously, you know, songwriters, artists, producers, and also, you know, and screenwriters and directors. And I'm just, and casting people. I nerd out on all this stuff. I'm a nerd. And one thing I can tell you is many times these books feel like a humble brag, and they sort of gloss over the struggle a little bit.
Mhm.
And the struggle is, you know, the first 75 pages, and then you get to, you know, how amazing it is when you know, when you're playing golf with Johnny Depp. I didn't, you know, I didn't, my path wasn't that path. I had my first hit at 35 years of age. So I just felt, I just wanted to make this really relatable for every living human who is in the arts. I'm sorry about the dogs, by the way.
No,
I don't know if you could hear them, but you
a little bit. It's
know,
all good. A little
they're
background
two
noise. It's all
little tiny terrors. But you know what I wanted to, I just wanted people to understand that it, you can do this and it's obtainable, but it might take you 15 years of bankrupting every record label in the business and failing at everything you do and getting passed on 1,000 times before you even make the slightest bit of headway. And you might end up doing drum programming on Kids Bop records at the age of 34. Like, you do whatever you can do to stay in it. And I just wanted to make sure that wasn't lost on creatives, because you know, I think if everything is a very shiny white veneer, you're not really getting to the essence of what the arts are. The arts are a struggle, and you know, you sort of ascertain whatever level you get to for you, whatever brings you joy is awesome, but you just have to go into it knowing there's a shit ton of failure in
Mhm.
the process, and use it as a weapon as opposed to a hindrance. And that's what I did. Those were calluses that formed, that completely fueled me creatively. Every failure I used to get me ahead, you know, and that's what the book is about, you know. So 21 hit wonder, it's a play on the term, obviously, one hit wonder. The truth is, the reality of that is, look, man, when I started out in this, I dreamed of having one hit. I dreamed of having one song that was definable, that might live on. I always say at Whole Foods and in the dentist's office and all these fun places. And you know, because that's how you're raised. You're like, wow, I'd love to write one hit. But once you get a taste of it and it feels like crystal meth, and you start scratching your face, you're like, I need more, I need more. And once I got deeper into it, I realized what all the previous years had led to. And I just wanted to sort of celebrate it and celebrate all these records that were never even heard, all these records that got dropped. Everything I touched got dropped from major labels. And I thought it was I thought it was crucial. So that's why I did it, you know?
When I think it's so inspiring to hear, like you just, I didn't realize that you were 35 when you got your first hit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to a lot of people, if they're 23, 24, like, oh, like I haven't had a hit, like I'm done, you know what I mean? Like it's so easy to just give up. Especially in this industry where it's so uncertain if you're going to make any money. Like what kept you going, like to talk about your failures and then move that forward a little bit? There must have been something kind of validating moving to keep you going forward a bit.
Yeah, there were always just little subtle wins, right?
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like there were little things that worked, right? I was identified by Carole King at 30. She wrote and produced the title track of the last record she ever made, Love Makes the World, right? It
Mm-hmm.
was amazing, you know. Um, Getting record deals for artists was very exciting. They just never came out. But I was getting record deals, you know. Uh, there were just so many little victories. A commercial here, writing it for a commercial, getting a song, hearing a commercial on TV. Look, first time I ever had a track on on television. It was in a episode of The Real World in one of the early seasons, and I
That's
remember
awesome.
I started crying. I have music in the real world. This is cool, you know. Even though it's background usage, it was cool having a song in the movie Eddie with Whoopi Goldberg, where I'm rapping with a German accent, and there's, you know, it's 5 seconds in the background of a Whoopi movie that's on at like 3 a.m. if you're stoned and you turn on HBO, and it's like, whoa, Whoopi, she coaches the Knicks. This is crazy, you know, like stuff like that, man. It's like there's just those little moments that fueled all of it, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's sort of it.
Would you say like was there a song that you can think of that when you wrote it, you're like, you knew it was going to be a hit, and then maybe it was like a sleeper or something that it took a little bit of time to, or you had to
Yeah,
really fight for
yeah,
it to be like, no, this is a good, trust me, this is going
yeah,
to work. This is going to work.
yeah, man. Banners, Someone to You by Banners. We wrote it in 2017. It was released in 2017. Came out, got zero playlisting, and he had 2 songs at that point that probably had about 20 million streams, but this thing got no playlisting and limped to like 1 million streams, nothing. And you know, his label had no interest. It was like, it couldn't be pushed to radio, and it went away. 2017, 2018, American Idol heard it. Somebody at Idol heard it, and they made it the unofficial theme for that season. They had him perform it on the season, blah 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 blah. Got the streams to like 4 million, but nothing. No one's going to work it. That was 2018. 2020, a YA movie on Netflix uses it as a trailer, and suddenly it gets to like 25 million streams within
Oh
about 6
wow.
months. I mean, label still no interest in it whatsoever. 2021, some kid makes a TikTok video to it, and now it's at 600 and something million streams. And I fought for it every step of the way. I was so annoying. I was in everyone's ear saying, "This song is a hit. This song is a hit. This song is a hit." The man Steve Gaguel, who had signed it at Island, had been had left the building 4 years previous. You know, so we didn't have him in the building. We didn't have the advocate for the act anymore at the label, the same extent. New regime, everything. But I just kept plotting, and eventually became a hit. It's a big hit. You know, but that was one of those songs where I had the galvanic response the second we wrote it. I was sure it was a hit. I told the artist that we were going to write a hit that day. I just knew that there was something special in the ethos that day. I felt it, you know, and
Mhm.
here we go, you know. So you know,
It's
just kind
interesting
of
that it took up to a TikToker to really make it just blow out of the water.
welcome to 2022.
I know, it's
You
just
know,
wild. It's
it's 2023. I don't even know what year it is, dog.
2023. I know. It's
Sorry,
so no, no,
sorry.
no. It's interesting because I come from radio. That's how I got into the thing,
Sure.
because I couldn't write songs, but I wanted to be around it. And I love music. So I worked on the radio for like 17 years before doing this podcast, really doing this podcast. But I remember like Empire of the Sun, like Walking on a Dream became a hit,
Sure.
and it was like from '08. And I remember when it first came out, and the radio didn't want to get close to touching it, but it made like, I think it was in an Apple commercial or something. And then it was like, oh, we're going to start playing this. We're going to get them to play our radio show. They're playing Coachella. They got the biggest, crowd. And it's just so wild that it took so long for it to make the
These
pass
th-
around.
and now with TikTok, you're competing against 55 years of music or 100 years of
Oh
music. You
yeah,
know what
I
I mean?
know.
So, and look, we're living in an era where 2022, the song of the summer was Kate Bush. So
I
every
know, which is a
it,
trip.
it it's so hard to game the system anymore. You just don't even understand it, because songs every week I'm hearing about a song that's 10 years old of a band that broke up, that suddenly raises its hand. There was this band Public from Cincinnati, and they had a great single 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, but the song was 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. I mean, these things just come out of nowhere. um and that's sort of exciting. It's nice to know that music can live on now, especially if somebody whose first 7 records didn't get released. But it's also fascinating because you really, everybody, there are no experts. We all know nothing. I could proselytize to you about all my thoughts about this, but I don't know anything because truthfully, it's changing so radically in front of my eyes. Next thing we'll conduct this interview. You're going to have an AI version of me in a week from now.
And that's scary, man.
The chat GRP version of me, just reciting these answers. I mean, it's just crazy. So I just try to take it all in stride and stay positive and keep going.
Mm-hmm. Is that where are you still doing kind of the A&R thing? Or, I mean, not really A&R, but like finding young talent to say, hey, I want to write for you. But, or is it mainly like, okay, I have this resume of X amount of songs, people are going to come knock and say,
I think it's more at this point. I hope it stays keep knock. I'd like to get back to development. In this TikTok era, it's very hard because what I loved about music that drew me to it was the mystique of artistry, and I knew nothing about Michael Stipe or Morrissey when I was in high school. I was trying to just connect dots and figure out who these people were, but now, unfortunately, to be an artist, you're really your own marketing department as well on TikTok. You have to feed the machine 3 times a day, and it's taken away a little bit of what I loved about it. And so I feel that the artists that I like are always maybe a little more aloof and sort of distant in some ways, which is what I love about them. And there's a mystery, and you can't have that at this moment, and that sucks. And so I'm waiting till the next platform comes along. I feel like we're a year away, because if you just follow the timeline, there's always a new one.
It's like 10 years. I heard I think it was the CEO or like the old CEO of Google was talking about it, how social media platforms go in 10-year cycles. So the next one will start. So you want to get on the one, you have to get on it before TikTok ends.
I tell every young artist, this is what I tell them. This is my speech. This is also on this book
tour.
This is what I've been saying. It's very
This clear. Is my last question is about advice. So I would love to hear it now, though. Let's hear it.
So it's very simple. What I tell them is very simple. And by the way, you know what? This is your last question. I'm going to answer it for you. Ready? Here's the advice. Ready? Because it's connected. Is while you're creating your music and putting on TikTok, because you have to at this moment, read tech blogs every single day. Read every tech piece. Get a handle on what's coming next, because MySpace, starting, I can go back 20 years to Friendster, and I remember week 1 of MySpace, and the people who got to MySpace early gamed the system in their favor. And look, MySpace changed my life completely altered my entire musical destiny, right? All those acts that we're talking about were MySpace bands of the era, and MySpace really was so music driven, changed my life. Well, the truth is, you could say YouTube changed people's lives. There's no Bieber without YouTube. Usher finds Bieber on YouTube. Shawn Mendes was the Vine kid, right? He was the poster child of Vine, and it blows up. Then, Musically comes along, and there are kids who popped off of Musically, and then Lil Nas X is the face of TikTok, and there will be the next thing. And just know that. So be on the ground floor, because I'll go to Spotify, and an artist will be sent to me, and they might have an average of 1 million streams per song, and then they have one song that's at 400 million. And I look and I realize that thing's like 2015 or whatever, Spotify, year 1, they got in day 1. And so it hit the algorithm in the playlist to get that point, and basically opened up a path for them. Artists at this moment, stay on top of the technology, because that's where this is all headed, and don't get left behind with it. Don't be cynical about it. Use it. Even if it bums you out to some extent, you don't have to pander to it to understand why it works. And I think that's the great skill set at this moment. Like, just really understand why things work and stay a step ahead.
Yeah, it is really interesting to think like how it does morph like that. I mean, if you get in early to something, Musically, for example, and then it turns into TikTok, and now you're the forefront of something that is just, and I try to tell it to my kid. I'm like, you need to find, I love hearing you say that as well, like whatever's going to happen next, because if you're there when it's happening, the company is going to kind of lift you up a little bit in itself, because you're already there.
Absolutely. So that's it.
That's amazing, man. And when it comes to that stuff too, I was just a quick follow-up on, I just have 2 more actually quick questions for you. One, when it comes to TikTok and stuff, like, do you feel like if you get that hit, like, do you ever feel like you have to kind of chase that? Or did you ever do that when you like had a song that worked? Was it like, okay, that worked, I need to kind of emulate what I did there?
I did that, and especially in the pop punk thing. Like there was a moment in time where I began to emulate it too often, and my writing felt like a parody of what it was, because I was chasing the exact same themes, same changes. We're just doing the writing versions of the same song, and after a while, it felt lazy and it didn't feel competitive, and you could tell that the songs just weren't as big. And so I will never do that. I don't write to a platform. I just sort of I write. I write completely gutturally. It's whatever instinctively I'm feeling, and it's usually probably counterintuitive to what's working. But those are the songs that happen for me, so I just go with it.
Mhm. And are you still writing daily? Like, do you get up and
Every,
just journal? Is that how you kind of
I
stay
write.
sharp?
I write 6 days a week, sometimes seven, and I have all these writing exercises. I have to write every single day. I'm writing probably popping out 2 or 3 songs a week on top of it. So I'm constantly in it. This book. I've been promoting this book. I'm giving all the. I don't know if I said this, but all my proceeds from this book, every single penny goes to Musicians on Call, it's a charity which brings music bedside to patients. I didn't take a penny for the book. Every penny from my end goes there. I'm also paying my way on this book tour. I've been to, I guess, 32 universities thus far. I'm trying to get to 50, paying my own way. And I'm just trying to get in front of kids and just explain, just sort of open their eyes to just a completely different journey, and just, that they might not have seen before. And that's why I'm doing this. And I'm beginning to, I have a few more months and then it'll wind down, but I'm still writing the whole time, and I'm still aggressively going for it. And this is my calling, man. This is what I do. This is what gets me up in the morning. So I will not stop.
I love it, man. Thank you again so much
Dude,
for doing this.
thank you, brother. Me and Steely Dan are gonna go eat a sandwich.
Bringing it backward.